Hi class, it's Bill and we are continuing with our week 3 demo. We are doing a menu-based system, and in the previous video we made a lot of progress. We now have the menu system in general working and the processing of integer-based choices. So let's continue with that thought and let's process the second choice. So we probably want to do something like this. Now, you could go down this road where you say an else, and then you tab in, and then you put an if statement, etc. Right? But we have a nice way to do this rather than having a continued set of indentation for a nested if. Instead of that, it's very common for us, and we have a whole bunch of stuff that's indented funny, so well, we'll fix that later. It's very common to do this, which gives you a way to short circuit that a little bit and make the output at least stay on the same indentation level, right? So we can do this if choice equals 2, and that way at least our indentations are all about the same. Notice one cool thing that you can do here. There's an auto layout function which will go get all of your indentation right, so that's a cool thing, and I just used that. So now if we go to do choice 2, what do we need to do? Well, we need to do a lot of this stuff. Okay, so I can go and copy all of this stuff here, and I can paste it down here. Now, I just did something bad, and I did it in a way that maybe you thought seemed completely innocent. Anytime you copy and paste a bunch of code, you want to stop and think, is that the right thing to do? And in this case, it is not the right thing to do. Anytime you're repeating code, you want to go see if you can factor that out and not repeat that code. So this is a great time when we say, look, we're doing the same stuff over and over. Why would we do that, right? Why would we do that stuff? So instead, why don't we bring that stuff out? Why don't we declare variables and say enter the temperature and get the next double? All of that stuff is stuff that's going to happen for every single one. So why don't we bring that out here and back tab it, and then why don't we take this stuff and bring it out here and back tab it so that it's got everything, that it only has what it needs. Right? So now I can just take this stuff out of here altogether, and now the calls are greatly simplified. Does that make sense to you? I hope it does, but please, please take this to heart. Anytime you're repeating code, when you cut and paste, that is generally a sign that something is going wrong. You probably have a better approach to take. Now, if we've done our job right, we have two menus working. Now, this is a great example. When I compiled this, this says, look, you got here, but there are some code paths that let result not have been set by this point. You only set result if choice was 1 or 2, but what if it's any other integer in the universe? So one of the things that we'll want to do to make Java happy here is say result equals 0.0, because worst case, you have, and we can set it equal to it here basically, right? Worst case, you've got a result of 0, and you'll know something's wrong from that, but that's a good warning to us that we want to make sure that we cover all of our code paths. So I think you can see now how this thing would go, and we will flesh out the rest of the choices very quickly here so we can see it all together. Okay, so now you can see I've fleshed out the rest of these, and they look really similar, right? All of these else's are very parallel, and the nested structure by using else and if lets us keep them in the same indentation level, so they're pretty easy to see. Now, one of the things that you will find if you go do testing is that we will fall into this, and we will try to do all this processing even if the user enters a choice that is not valid. So if they enter something like 18, we'll still fall in here and ask them for the temperature. So we probably don't want to do that. We probably want to guard against this such that we don't do any processing, and we don't ask them for the temperature either if they enter something that's invalid. So how do we want to do that? How do we guard it? Well, we want to have an if statement that guards that thing, that says something like if, and we want to say if the choice is valid, then we want to do all of these things. Otherwise, we may want to just ignore it and let the menu just loop around or something. So in this case, how do we say if it's a valid choice we want to proceed? Well, if choice is greater than or equal to 1 and And in this case, in Java, we use not the word and, but two ampersands together. One ampersand means something different, so don't do that. And then we say and the choice is less than or equal to 6. All right, so our condition becomes that, and we want to surround a whole bunch of stuff, including this, with our parentheses. And let's see if it compiles, and let me just let Java make it pretty for me. There we go. So we can say this to make sure that our choice is valid, right? So we want to only proceed, only act on valid choices, I guess say, act on valid choices. So now we can move some other stuff in here too, right? Because we want to take the prompting and the getting of the next double, we want to move that in too. So we can come in here, we can paste that, and we can tab those guys in, right? So that really kind of cleans up the code, and it makes it work very well. So I think, let's see if that compiles. I think that's good. Now let's go back and do some quick testing to make sure that things are good. So let's run the thing, and let's jump over to our terminal window. There's our menu, and we're going to say I want to do choice 1. Enter the input temperature, 10.0 degrees. Okay, converted temperature is -12. Sure. Okay, now let me go run it again, and let's do another one just to make sure we've tested at least 2 of those things. Let's choose choice 2. Input temperature is Fahrenheit to Kelvin. Okay, so 23 degrees ought to be, okay, yeah. So again, you want to, that looks suspicious to me. Something looks wrong with that. But anyway, the menu choice is there, and you want to go take a look if we're calling the right stuff, and at least it looks like the menu choices are being processed. So that's a good start, and we've got the menu. The problem is at this moment, one of our problems is the menu doesn't loop. So we need to go fix that as our next step. Make sure that that is cool. And actually, before we make the menu loop, let's take care of one other option that will, we don't want to complicate the loop at this point. So let's take care of one other option that's important, and that is, what if the user enters something on the menu that is not valid? Bad data type, basically. So let's see what happens if I run this thing, and when I enter something like, I'm supposed to enter a menu choice, and what if I enter 56.2 or 0.4? Right? I get the exception, and I get this input match exception. So it's saying the scanner is barfing on us, and it's saying, hey, this doesn't work, right? You've got something wrong here. So we need to take a little bit of extra care here that lets us be smarter about this and make sure that we refuse bad data. So here's how you do this. It's a funny thing, but it uses a choice or an option called Scanner Look Ahead. And the way that it works is we can set up a loop, and this loop is going to help us weed out bad data. Now we have 2 choices of types of loops, right? We have do whiles and we have while loops. The difference is a while loop tests at the top, and a while loop then therefore will help us in cases where we're not sure whether we need to proceed. We may not need to run the loop even once, right? But maybe we do, right? So in those kinds of cases, we use a while loop. If we know we want to do the whole thing once, we can use a do while loop. So which kind of case is this? Well, in this case, you're not sure, the user may enter the perfectly good thing right away. Right? So you may not need to get in here at all, but you may. So the best choice for that is a while loop because it tests at the top. You're not sure whether you need to do it at all. So for instance, we can say while not console in, and this is the look ahead, has next int. We say, hey, scanner, while you don't have an integer, we want to keep doing this loop. All right, and instead of next int, what we're going to do, it's really easy, we're just going to keep throwing away tokens. In fact, I'm not even going to save them, right? I'm not even going to save them. So we can simply repeat this and say, hey, while we haven't yet seen an integer, we're going to throw away input. That's what you basically read this as. And then once we get out, we can say, hey, we have an integer, so let's go grab it. Right? So this whole thing, this little bit of code that we've written here, does scanner look ahead. Again, read carefully. We have a while loop because we're not sure. There may already be an integer in the buffer, and if so, we don't need to come in here. So we say while we do not have console in has next int. So this would be true if there's an integer in the buffer. We're not grabbing the integer, we're just peeking at the buffer to see whether there's an integer. So we're continuing to loop while we do not have an integer in the buffer. And if we don't have an integer, we throw away that input and we ask them again. And we just keep doing that, right? We keep letting them enter things until finally we exit from the loop if there is an integer, and this doesn't need to be an equal sign, sorry, con in dot next int. Okay, that's better. So this is funky. This is unusual code, but you want to stop and think about it, and that's how you use scanner look ahead to make sure that you have the correct data type that you want. Now, we also would want to do this later. Acting on the valid choices, we'll also want to take care of that later from getting the double that we need as well, but I'm going to leave that for you, and I'm going to move this in, and let's see, yeah, there we go. So I'm going to delete that line, pull it in a little bit, and now we have a menu that does not loop, but it certainly does have everything that we need in it, and now next we can go make the menu loop, and I think we'll be in good shape. Now, to make sure that we've done this right, let's compile, let's go back and run, and let's go put in some bad data and see if it works. Okay, so my choice is 53.4. It just says, hey, I'm just ignoring you, I'm going right ahead. -5, -1, it's a valid integer. Okay, goodbye, because we don't have the menu looping. So we actually have everything working except the looping, I think. So the next piece that we're going to cover is in fact that looping. So let's continue with that in the next video, and thanks for watching this one.